Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 329. Thank you for tuning in. Going to pick up where we left off in the last podcast, still talking about Jeffrey Epstein, still talking about his connections to the intelligence community. I have a lot to share with you guys today, so let's get right into it. In the last podcast, I ended the last podcast with a couple of clips from the series, the Showtime series Homeland. And the Showtime series Homeland, which starred Claire Danes. I think it had 13 seasons. It's all about the CIA and the CIA activities. And then the last podcast, I showed the clip of Claire Danes on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, talking about how members of the show would meet with members of the CIA in Georgetown, and they would get insights on the intelligence community. And she let out a little secret, which is not a secret. If you know anything about the CIA and the intelligence community, they've always worked very closely with the media and with journalists. But she says in that interview with Stephen Colbert that the CIA started working with journalists, and Colbert cuts her off frantically because she wasn't supposed to say that. But again, if you know anything about the CIA, you know they've always worked with it. What do you think, Operation Mockingbird was? But in the scene that we were looking at in the last podcast, the director of Central Intelligence, Saul, he needs to get a warrant after the fact. This is the character Brody, who was a POW, and he comes back, and she basically believes that he's compromised, but she didn't have any proof. She starts spying on him, and then Saul, director of Central Intelligence, finds out, says he's going to report her to the Inspector General. She ends up convincing him that, look, there's something here. So he has to go get a FISA warrant after the fact. So he goes and blackmails the FISA judge. He has information to blackmail the FISA judge, and the FISA judge says, are you ever going to let me off your hook, Saul? And he says, we both know that you're too fine of a judge for that. You're too fine of a judge for me to, as the director of Central Intelligence, to let you off the hook. And then the judge says, well, can we at least pretend like this is about the law instead of a brief moment of weakness in my past? And so brief moment of weakness in my past, that is what allowed the Central Intelligence to get this compromising information on the FISA judge. And I was telling you guys a couple of podcasts ago that there's one of four reasons that the Trump administration is lying to us about the Jeffrey Epstein documents and the information on Jeffrey Epstein. And I said either it's national security, there's a national security risk, or either Trump was threatened, his family was threatened by these very, very powerful people, or Trump is in the Jeffrey Epstein documents and there's something incriminating on him that he's trying to hide, or Trump is using this, he wants to keep this information and he wants to use it to blackmail these very powerful people, because that's what the information is. It's about blackmail. That's what all this is about. That's what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. And there's a word for this intelligence method, and it's called compromat. And compromat is a Russian word. I'm going to find a couple of terms here for you. The first one is compromat. Compromat is compromising material, discrediting material, or incriminating material. Is damaging information about a person or a group, commonly a politician, a businessman, or other public figure, which may be used to create negative publicity as well as blackmail purposes, often to exert influence rather than monetary gain and extortion. So compromise may be acquired from various security services or outright forged and then publicized via public relations officials. So compromise is what the director of Central Intelligence was using to blackmail this FISA judge to get this FISA warrant in the show. And if you think that this is something that was fictionalized in this show, you're crazy. This is something that is part of intelligence operations, compromise. Another term that we want to translate is the term tradecraft. Tradecraft. And compromise is part of tradecraft. And we'll read a little bit of what tradecraft is here. Tradecraft within the intelligence community refers to techniques, methods, technologies used in modern espionage, spying, and generally part of the activity of intelligence assessments. So compromise is intelligence tradecraft. All intelligence agencies use compromise. This is a Russian word. The KGB use compromise. Mossad uses compromise. The CIA uses compromise. MI6 uses it. This is part of tradecraft, intelligence tradecraft, and that's what was going on in Homeland. And the reason that I was saying that national security could be one of the reasons that the Trump administration is lying to us and not divulging this compromise, if it still exists at all, is because just like this FISA judge was being blackmailed in Homeland, if the government released all of this compromising material on all of these people, and who knows who these people are, it could be a huge national security risk to know, for the public to know, that judges, businessmen, that people that are in positions of authority and that are running our not only our country, running our world, are compromised in these ways. It could be a huge national security risk, and that's something that you got to understand. So we were talking about the fact that Alex Acosta, who was the DOJ attorney prosecuting Epstein when he was first arrested in 2005, Alex Acosta was told by the Bush administration, by the Bush DOJ, that Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. And then Epstein ends up getting a sweetheart plea deal that he gets in 2008. And it's interesting that everybody wants to blame Donald Trump for covering up what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. If you want to blame any president for covering up what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, it has to be this guy. It has to be George Bush, because this happened during the George Bush administration when Epstein was arrested for the first time in 2005. George Bush's DOJ was the one who told Alex Acosta that this guy's intelligence and to leave it alone. And he got the sweetheart plea deal under the Bush administration. George Bush. If anybody is to blame for covering it up, any one person, any one president, it would be George Bush. But George Bush is not the only one who's covered this up. And yes, I admit that Trump is lying to us and Trump is covering it up. And I've gave you 4 reasons that I believe are possible for Trump covering this up. But if one of the reasons that I gave you is that there's something incriminating about Trump in the Epstein documents and Epstein files, and if that's the case, then I mean, why George Bush cover it up? Why did Barack Obama cover it up? Why did Joe Biden cover it up if it's something that's only incriminating about Donald Trump in these documents? No, all these presidents covered it up, but namely this guy, George Bush. He was the first to cover it up. His DOJ is the one that told Alex Acosta that Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. These are 2 paintings that were in Jeffrey Epstein's house in the islands, in the Virgin Islands, and he owned 2 islands. This one of George Bush sitting with his legs crossed with 2 paper airplanes and blocks that have been knocked down on the ground. What do you think that this represents? he's got two paper airplanes. One paper airplane is on the ground with these blocks that are disassembled and on the ground, and George Bush is holding the paper airplane like he threw the paper airplane into the blocks. What do you think this represents? 9/11, the Twin Towers. These are the Twin Tower pieces of the Twin Towers on the ground, and the two airplanes, paper airplanes, represent the planes that flew into the World Trade Center. This was in Jeffrey Epstein's house. This one too. Bill Clinton in the blue dress. What's the blue dress represents? This is Monica Lewinsky's blue dress that supposedly had Bill Clinton's semen on it. Why are these paintings in Jeffrey Epstein's house? What does George Bush and Bill Clinton have to do with Jeffrey Epstein? Why would he put these in his house? But you have to understand the relationship between the Bush family and Clintons. I've played this clip before, but take a listen.
Your husband and Bill Clinton have become good friends.
That's right. My husband, Bill Clinton, and I have become great friends, and Bill visits us every summer.
Bill visits us every summer. Bill and my husband and I are great friends. And the reporter says that you guys have become good friends. But no, if you know the story of Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, their relationship goes back to at least the time when Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas. I believe it goes back to, long before that Bill Clinton was George H.W. Bush's protege.
Bill's father wasn't around, and I think that he thinks of George a little bit like the father he didn't have.
Bill Clinton thinks of George H.W. Bush like the father he didn't have. He's a father figure.
And he's very loving to him, and I really appreciate that.
I'm doing it. My mother calls me my fourth brother.
My mother calls him my fourth brother. My mother calls Bill Clinton George Bush says my mother calls Bill Clinton my fourth brother.
Calls him my fourth brother.
Is that right?
The black sheep of the family.
The black sheep of the family.
Democrats forgive me this close to the election. I love George Bush.
I love George Bush is what Bill Clinton. So you got to understand the relationship of Clinton and Bush to understand what's going on here and why Epstein would have these two paintings in his house of Bill Clinton in the blue dress and George Bush with the two planes knocking over the blocks. That this goes way back. Even Nancy Pelosi. This is a post from Nancy Pelosi wishing George H.W. Bush happy birthday. Nancy Pelosi wishing very happy birthday to President George H.W. Bush. Look at the hand on the shoulder. This is Pelosi's husband here. Barbara Bush. Very friendly, very loving relationship they have. And Pelosi came out this week and said that Epstein and the Epstein files are a distraction. She says the same thing that Trump says, is that we shouldn't be focusing on Epstein, is what she says. What's going on here? I played a little bit of this clip of Eric Weinstein. Eric Weinstein is a brilliant man. I have a couple of clips that I want to play from him in this episode, but I want to play more of this interview that he does on this podcast. This is the Diary of a CEO podcast. Let's listen to Eric Weinstein.
Jeffrey Epstein conducted a conference called Confronting Gravity. I don't know who Jeffrey Epstein was, but I would certainly bet money that he was a product of at least one or more elements of the intelligence community.
The CIA, the FBI.
Those are ours, right? Department of Homeland Security has some of this stuff. Geospatial intelligence has some of this. It's a large network. I'm talking about people like David Grush.
This is he's a UFO whistleblower. Is who this guy is. UFO whistleblower.
I'm talking about people potentially like David Fravor.
Another UFO whistleblower.
I'm talking about people like Jake Barber.
Another UFO whistleblower.
I'm talking about scientists like Leo Szilard. Imagine if Leo Szilard didn't know that the Manhattan Project was going on, or Jack Raper, a journalist who broke a story. These people all think that they're doing their jobs. I desperately want to know why Jeffrey Epstein knew so much about my work. And I want to know why he was connected to my graduate program. I was in the Harvard mathematics department. Jeffrey Epstein was absolutely connected to the Harvard math department. I want to know why.
How was he connected to the math department?
You're pushing me to say things I'm not going to say. But I don't mind.
I'm curious. I'm not trying to push you out.
I understand, but I'm just not going to do it. I'm saying that anybody who wants to...
You said he was connected to the math department?
To the Harvard mathematics department.
How did you know he was connected?
You can Google it. You could Google it right now.
All right, so he Googles it. So this is when he's doing the edit of the interview. He puts this Google search in here where he does what Eric Weinstein says. He Googles Jeffrey Epstein connected to the Harvard mathematics department.
This is not... I can point at all sorts of stuff that's hidden in plain sight.
So I'll take your word for it. And the assertion that I'm picking up on is that Jeffrey Epstein was planted in your world to keep...
I'm not saying these plain...
Hey, Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted offender, had significant ties. This is him Googling. And if you don't know Google, now if you search for something, it gives you an AI response to your search right away. So this is the AI response to him searching Jeffrey Epstein, Harvard math department. Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender, had significant ties to the Harvard University, including donations that benefited faculty and programs, including the program on evolutionary dynamics, PED, which was linked to mathematics department. So what Weinstein is saying here is absolutely true. That you Google it, and Jeffrey Epstein was connected to the Harvard mathematics department.
One is that Jeffrey Epstein was planted in your world to keep...
I'm not saying he's planted. I don't know who he was. I don't know who ran him. He certainly was not a financier in any standard sense.
Really?
That was a cover story, yes.
The way that we know Jeffrey Epstein, in the UK especially, is just this guy who was this rich guy who had this island, who brought people there and then did these despicable things there.
Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, that's the story.
Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. It's called perseveration. He was a disgraced financier. What kind of a financier? A disgraced one. What was his name? Oh, it was disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. They perseverate that into your mind so that you auto-complete that in your LLM life. Do you believe that that's what Jeffrey Epstein was?
You met him.
Yeah. I can tell that
financier?
He wasn't a financier the day I met him.
What was he?
He was a weird guy who didn't seem to know a lot about currency trading. Claiming to run a multi-billion-dollar FX hedge fund.
When you say a weird guy, what made him weird?
Same stuff I've said on Chris Williams. I'm not going to go back through that. Just my point is you're getting a different interview, right? Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to get at is Jeffrey Epstein knew a tremendous amount about my work when nobody knew anything about my work. And he had a pipeline into me that I didn't understand, which is that he was connected to my graduate program. And you can check out the conference called Exploring Gravity.
And hosted a physical workshop called Confronting Gravity.
Confronting Gravity, that's right.
In March 2006.
Yeah, what is Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein is very focused on gravity.
Was it a gravity conference?
Yeah.
It was about gravity?
Yeah.
What the fuck was he doing talking about bloody gravity if he's a financier?
It was very important to get Nobel laureates and some of the smartest people on Earth to come to the Virgin Islands and talk about gravity. Stephen Hawking was there, David Gross was there, Lawrence Krauss was there, Lisa Randall was there.
Here's the picture of Stephen Hawking, and these other scientists at the island. What was Stephen Hawking doing on Pervert's Island? So everything that Weinstein is saying here is absolutely true. Stephen Hawking and these scientists took multiple trips to the islands. And so this is something else that was going on that Epstein was involved in as an intelligence asset.
Right before his conviction. And I'm telling you, he was very focused on the Harvard math department. And he knew all about me in ways that he wasn't supposed to.
I have to be clear. I have to be clear on my understanding of what you're saying. From what I understood, and you can say, Steve, I'm not going to answer that, whatever, but I just have to, because you've opened up a curiosity hole in my mind.
Sure.
So let me try and fill it, even if it's the conversation I had with Chris.
I'll just evade you.
Fine.
Fine.
Like, fine. You're within the right
Wonderful.
to evade me. And I hold the right to ask, which is, so what I'm hearing is you believe, and I'm just going to say it how I think it, is what I'm hearing is you believe that Jeffrey Epstein was not a financier. He was planted in some way to interfere.
He was a construct, is what I said.
He was a construct in some way to mess with the progression of physics.
Jeffrey Epstein, apparently, I think I'll tell you what I said. When I met him, when the meeting was over, I immediately called my wife and I said, I have just met a construct. She said, what do you mean? I said, this person is not who they claim to be. Somebody has constructed this human being to be something that they are not, which is a hedge fund genius. Somebody who could understand the euro and the yen like nobody else. Bullshit. Not true. I believe that whoever constructed Jeffrey Epstein was running multiple different programs through the same thing, having put in a large initial investment. It wasn't about one thing. If you build a mall, you don't just have clothing stores in the mall, you have a food court in the mall, right? You have jewelry in the mall. You have all sorts of different things in the mall. Jeffrey Epstein was a construct of something that was running multiple things. One of those things was science. And I don't think that the science and the pedophilia were necessarily in the same bucket.
All right. So he was doing multiple things. His intelligence asset, he was created is what Eric Weinstein believes, that he was a construct that was created by someone, funded by someone, and he was purposed to do multiple jobs. One of those jobs was collecting compromise on very powerful people, blackmailing him. That's why he had the cameras all over his house. That's why he had the cameras at the island, and he was servicing these elite people with whatever their kink was, young girls, whatever. He was servicing them and collecting compromise on them. All right, so I have another interview that Eric Weinstein did with Piers Morgan earlier this week, and he goes into a little bit more. Take a listen.
One of the things that may have happened is that Trump and company, once they actually got the information, may have said, oh my gosh, it's something quite different than we imagined. But I believe that this is either this happened with the non-knowledge of our intelligence services, in which case there was a giant failure of us to know what was going on inside of our own borders, or almost certainly this was a product of some amount of some portion of our covert operations group, and then maybe covert operations groups in other countries. Obvious candidates are the UK, Israel, Saudi Arabia, what have you. And whatever this is, you have this giant collision between people who are not supposed to take an interest in covert operations and people who do this kind of stuff for a living. There's an entire giant legal infrastructure around the collision between an open society and covert operations and shielding them. I mean, there's something called SSP, state secrets privilege, like attorney.
All right, states here. He says it's like attorney-client privileges, states secrets privileges.
I mean, there's something called SSP, state secrets privilege, like attorney-client privilege or spousal privilege, where to keep things out of the courts. There's clandestine back channels where there are tacit agreements that the Department of Justice is supposed to hold off. There are national security letters that can get sent. You know, we have secret internet called JWICs and other things for communication. There's a giant infrastructure of secrecy.
A giant infrastructure of secrecy. So he says state secrets privilege. I didn't know anything about this before looking at that internet. Eric Weinstein is a brilliant, brilliant man. So I didn't know anything about this, but I looked it up. State secrets privileges. Let's read a little bit of this. State secrets privileges is a evidentiary rule created by the United States legal precedent. Application of the privilege result in exclusion of evidence for a legal case based solely on affidavits submitted by the government stating that court proceedings might disclose sensitive information which might endanger national security. What are the 4 reasons that I told you that Trump is lying to us, that he's possibly lying to us? The first one I said was national security. And this is what I'm talking about, that there's something that threatens national security that Trump can't release these. And if it's related to the state secrets privilege, which has been ruled on by the Supreme Court, then Trump can't release this stuff. He can't release compromise on all these important people and what the CIA and the FBI were doing, because they have state secrets privilege. It's a danger to national security. That's what this is. I didn't know anything about this, but this is a real thing. This is what Weinstein is talking about here, is that there is an entire secrecy apparatus that is not only deals with our intelligence community, but the courts are involved. The courts ruled on the state's secrets privilege.
And what you can see right here is almost certainly what you can, the collaboration of the press. And this is the thing that I've been highlighting. You have a hedge fund that almost certainly didn't exist in the terms that it was claimed. When I met with him, he was supposedly running a multi-billion-dollar FX hedge fund, foreign exchange hedge fund. That thing would have to leave a wake in the data. It would have to have filings. It would have to have employees. My recollection is that he told me that he only employed Orthodox Jews from Brooklyn because they were the only ones trustworthy to run such a secretive operation. My guess is that this was all nonsense. And there's even a concept called dummy compliance, where you file forms, you get things blessed by cooperative auditors, but there's no way to fake a trail in the markets. And I think that this is the interesting thing. I can tell that this is a fake story because it sells papers and no one wants to cover it. And when I say no one, it's not the journalists.
Listen to what he's saying. He's saying that he says that not only do you have the state secrets privileges in this apparatus of secrecy, this also involves our media and our journalists. He says that this is a juicy story that sells papers, but no one wants to cover this story. That lets you know that this secrecy cabal, this secrecy network, not only is in the intelligence community, like Claire Danes says in the interview that she does with Colbert, that the intelligence community was working with the journalists. Yeah, we know that. We know that going back to Operation Mockingbird, that the intelligence community is working with the journalists. And he's saying that this is a juicy story and nobody wants to report this. Why doesn't anybody want to report this?
This is the interesting thing. I can tell that this is a fake story because it sells papers and no one wants to cover it. And when I say no one, it's not the journalists. The journalists want to cover it. They always come to me and they say, this is amazing. I'm going to follow all this up. And I tell them 2 weeks from now, you're going to have a really weird conversation with your editor. Where they're
Listen to what he's saying. And then remember the podcast that I did a few weeks ago called Editorial Discretion. This goes back to what I was telling you about editorial. He's saying the journalists want to report on this. The journalists want to do this juicy story because this is a juicy story that they want to report on. And he says that he meets with journalists all the time and say, yeah, I'm going to report on this. I'm going to go run this story. And he says, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're not going to report this story because as soon as you go to your editors with this story, they're going to kill the story.
The journalists want to cover it. They always come to me and they say, this is amazing. I'm going to follow all this up. And I tell them 2 weeks from now, you're going to have a really weird conversation with your editor where they're going to tell you everyone's moved on and no one cares, or there's not enough to go on. This is controlled at the editorial layer, not at the journalistic layer.
It is controlled at the editorial layer, not at the journalistic layer. I mean, and if you go back and you look at the podcast that I did that is titled Editorial Discretion, it's not at the editorial level. It's at the corporate level. This is at the corporate level, at the corporate hierarchy that are putting their finger on the scale and telling these journalists, no, you're not going to report that. Through the editor. No, you're not going to report that. That's where it happens. It happens at the corporate level because there's only a handful of corporations that own all of these networks. And this is what I was telling you. Really interesting that this weekend, the ABC News, they wanted to report on the fact that, Trump's in trouble because of these Epstein files, and Trump's in trouble with his base politically because of these Epstein files. He won't release the Epstein files. And that's all that they wanted to talk about on This Week on ABC.
The political fallout from this has escalated all week, leaving President Trump in a defensive crouch and sparing no one, including his own supporters, from his wrath. Here's senior political correspondent Rachel Scott.
This week, President Trump facing a political crisis and lashing out as his administration struggles to turn the page on the investigation into convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
So listen to this. This is ABC News doing this report on how the fallout and how Trump's in trouble with his base because he's covering up for Epstein. Just like Weinstein said, that ABC News covered up first. That we got this from Project Veritas because it was leaked to us that just like Weinstein says, that the journalists wanted to support this. The journalist sees this as a juicy story, but the journalist is stopped from reporting this by the editors. And like I'm telling you, it's not the editors, it's the corporations. It's Disney corporations that killed this story.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. Yeah. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton. We had everything.
We had Clinton. We had everything. We had Clinton. We had everything. This is ABC Disney killing the story. And then now ABC's acting like, this is the biggest story ever. Well, why is this the biggest story ever? Why'd you kill it, ABC Disney? And that's what Weinstein is talking about here. That at the editorial corporate level, that they wouldn't allow these journalists to report on this.
Follow all this up, and I tell them 2 weeks from now, you're going to have a really weird conversation with your editor where they're going to tell you everyone's moved on and no one cares, or there's not enough to go on. This is controlled at the editorial layer, not at the journalistic layer. And there's something called negative contrast imaging, where if you have an environment in which you have a stealth object and everything else reflects, you can actually map the stealth object by trying to bounce things off of it and realizing that it's the only thing that doesn't bounce any signal back. So,
I mean, this guy is brilliant. He really is. I am very impressed by Eric Weinstein. Anyway, so everything he's saying is true. Is that journalists, he would talk to journalists that want to report this story. It's a juicy story. He would tell them, look, they're not going to let you report this story because this story is shrouded in secrecy at the corporate level, and at the legal level through the state secrecy privilege, through the intelligence. This is a huge operation of secrecy. And this takes me back to the quote that I read to you from John Kennedy, that John Kennedy, the speech that he gave to the press club, after the Bay of Pigs incident, shortly after he was sworn in as president. And I'm going to read it to you again. He says, for we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of election, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlines. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned. No rumor is printed. No secret is revealed. I want to play a little bit more of John F. Kennedy in his own words giving that speech. This is what he says just before the excerpt that I just read.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it.
So he says that the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. They shot this guy in the face. They blew his head off in front of America. The very word secrecy is repugnant. And if you understand this speech that he gives after the Bay of Pigs incident, people, you got to understand that they were running all this stuff during the Eisenhower administration. Eisenhower's Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, his brother, Alan Dulles, was director of Central Intelligence. Richard Nixon, who was Eisenhower's vice president, was running all these covert operations in the 50s. Much of it behind Congress's back. And then they had the Bay of Pigs invasion planned after the 1960 election, which was one of the closest elections in American history. They were expecting Richard Nixon, who was Eisenhower's vice president, who had been running all these operations during the Eisenhower administration. They were expecting Nixon to win that election. And Nixon comes in and it's business as usual. We've already got the Bay of Pigs incident plan, or Bay of Pigs invasion plan. Nixon's going to win the election. He's going to come in and approve it. And boom, we're going to, do the invasion of Cuba. But that's not what happened. Nixon doesn't win that very close election in 1960. John Kennedy wins that election. And they tricked John Kennedy into approving this. And then after it's a failed mission, they started asking John Kennedy for air cover in Cuba. He's like, I'm not going to give you air cover. What are you guys doing to me? And I told you in the last podcast, he famously says after the Bay of Pigs incident that I want to splinter the CIA into tiny little pieces and scatter them into the wind. He fires Alan Dulles after that. He fires all of Dulles's deputies in the CIA after that. And then he gives this speech to the press club about secrecy and about secret societies and about a monolithic conspiracy. What's going on here, people? What's going on here? So the Democrats, like I told you, they smell blood in the water because they see this as a political issue for Donald Trump. Donald Trump promised to release the Epstein files, which he really didn't promise. He didn't make the Epstein files much of his campaign. They made a huge mistake giving those stupid binders, phase 1 binders, to those influencers. But the Democrats see this as a political play, and they're trying to play politics with it. But many in the media are questioning, well, if this is a big deal, the releasing of these Epstein documents, why didn't you guys do it when you controlled Congress, when you controlled the White House? You controlled everything for the first 2 years of Biden's administration. Why didn't you guys release this stuff? Jamie Raskin.
We could have gotten that from 21 to 25 when Democrats controlled the DOJ. Why? It was a crisis then. It's a crisis now.
Like he says, that not only did you guys control Congress, both chambers of Congress for the first 2 years of the Biden administration, Biden controlled and Merrick Garland controlled DOJ for all 4 years of Biden's administration. Why don't you guys get this stuff out about Epstein files, everything you're asking for now, Raskins?
The DOJ. Why? It was a crisis then. It's a crisis now. Why didn't Democrats call for it from 21 to 25?
So, I mean, you'd have to go back and look specifically at particular prosecutorial decisions and what was taking place in terms of the other cases. So I don't know. We could try to reconstruct that record. But the point is that Donald Trump is the one who has led the crusade to say that.
Well, why? Why is Donald Trump leading the crusade? If it's so important, why weren't you leading the crusade? Why is Donald Trump and Trump supporters the only one who've been talking about this if it's so important, Raskins? That's what he's asking. If it was so important the way that you guys are making it important now, why did you guys lead the effort to release this stuff in Congress under Biden? Why didn't you force Biden's DOJ to release this stuff is what Joe Scarborough is asking. Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, senator from Tennessee, tried many times during the Biden administration to force the Judiciary Committee to force the Biden, she's a Republican, to force the Judiciary Committee when the Democrats were running the Judiciary Committee to release this stuff, release everything on Jeffrey Epstein. This is during the Biden administration when Democrats controlled the Judiciary Committee. And I'm going to show you what happened. But let's listen to Marsha Blackburn here.
And that a large network of high-profile, high-dollar predators took part in this horrific abuse. That's why on the Senate Judiciary Committee, I've repeatedly requested a subpoena for the complete, unredacted Epstein flight logs from the FBI.
So she needed to get the committee to vote on this subpoena. She was in the minority. The Democrats were in the majority, and she tried many times to get the unredacted flight logs, to get all of this information repeatedly from the FBI when the Democrats were in charge. And I'm going to show you what happened.
The subpoena for the complete, unredacted Epstein flight logs from the FBI. I've also pushed for the release of Ghislaine Maxwell's unredacted little black book of contacts and addresses. The American people have the right to know who flew on his planes, who witnessed the crimes, and who potentially participated in his global sex trafficking ring.
Global.
Yet time and again, in the last Congress, Democrat leadership and then FBI Director Wray stonewalled my requests.
Democrat leadership and Director Wray stonewalled my request. Why didn't we get the subpoena in the Judiciary Committee? Who was running the Judiciary Committee? It was Dirty Dick Durbin. Dirty Dick Durbin. Now, Amy Klobuchar is on the committee. Democrat. She's on the committee. Again, Jake Tapper presses her, just like you saw Joe Scarborough press Jamie Raskinson. Why didn't you guys go after this stuff during the Biden administration? Why didn't you guys vote on Marsha Blackburn when she was trying to get the subpoena in the Judiciary Committee? I mean, what was going on there, Amy Klobuchar? Take a listen to her answer.
After the Miami Herald story broke in 2018, you said there was something not right in the Epstein case. But it's true that the president says there, Democrats didn't really seem to do anything about the Epstein files throughout the 4 years of the Biden administration. I mean, should you have? You sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Marsha Blackburn for years has been trying to get flight records and other information about Epstein released, and she seems to have been the only one on that committee trying to do so.
So the president blaming Democrats for this disaster, Jake, is like that CEO that got caught on camera blaming Coldplay, okay?
Oh, that's funny.
This is his making. He was president when Epstein got indicted for these charges.
No, he wasn't a president when Epstein got indicted. When Epstein got indicted the first time, it was this guy who was president of the United States. It was this guy who was president. It doesn't matter, if it's so important to you guys, Klobuchar. If it's so important to you now, why wasn't it important to you back in the Biden administration? Why didn't you guys vote on when Marsha Blackburn is trying to get a subpoena for this stuff in the Judiciary Committee? I mean, you say that it's so important now, but it wasn't when you guys were in charge of the Judiciary Committee and when Dirty Dick Durbin was the chair and Biden was president and Merrick Garland was the attorney general. Why wasn't it important to you guys then?
He was president when Epstein got indicted for these charges and went to prison. He was president when Epstein committed suicide. And then there was another case, as you know, that continued during the Biden administration. But he was president back then, so all of us would believe they know what's in these documents. They know it's there. They've been claiming forever that they should be released. And it is the Trump administration that gave a bunch of binders that said Volume 1.
That was a mistake.
just in the last month.
That was a mistake.
It is the Trump administration that has made this promise that they're going to release it. So I am blaming.
But why? Why is Trump the only one making the promise that he's going to release it? If it's so important to you guys, if it's so important to the Democrats, why is Trump and Trump supporters the only one who wanted it and who tried to get this stuff released before 2 weeks ago? I mean, 2 weeks ago, it became a political problem for Trump, and you guys smell blood in the water and you want to play politics. It's all about politics for you now. But why is Trump the only one, and Trump people the only one talking about releasing this stuff? Why weren't any Democrats talking about releasing this stuff? Why were Democrats obstructing Marsha Blackburn from getting a subpoena to get this stuff released when in the Biden administration? Why? And Jake Tapper doesn't ask her any follow-up at all when she gives this nonsense answer. This is Dirty Dick Durbin, and when he was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee being asked by a Fox reporter, why don't you care about this, Dirty Dick?
Chairman Durbin, can I ask you a quick question? Why won't you subpoena Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs?
So who are you?
Hillary Vaughn with Fox.
Fox, of course.
Fox, of course. Who are you? I'm with Fox. Oh, Fox, of course. Of course, you would be asking about this being from Fox. You know, Fox wants the Epstein flight logs that Marsha Blackburn is trying to get. I don't want to give them. What are you hiding, Dirty Dick?
Ask you a quick question. Why won't you subpoena Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs?
So who are you?
Hillary Vaughn with Fox.
Fox, of course. I don't know anything about his flight logs.
Why won't you subpoena them? Why don't you want to know?
I don't know the issue. I know who Epstein was, but I certainly don't know anything about the issue.
Not a big issue.
He was charged with sex trafficking,
Not
so
a big issue,
why don't you want to know who was utilizing his private plane?
Never been raised by anyone.
It's never been raised by anyone. What are you talking about? Marsha Blackburn's on the committee. She raised it. What are you talking about? Many times. And you blocked her. Dirty Dick. You wouldn't let her. You wouldn't let even a vote come up to subpoena these records. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, he was charged with sex trafficking, so why don't you want to know who was utilizing his private plane?
Never been raised by anyone.
Well, Senator Blackburn has wanted to subpoena them, and there hasn't been a vote in your committee.
Said a word to me. Not a word.
Never said a word to me.
Aren't you curious, like, what high-profile or powerful people might be closeted predators and pedophiles? Doesn't that concern you?
Of course.
So why won't you subpoena them if you can?
It's the first time anyone has raised it. Thank you, Fox.
Wow. It's the first time anyone has raised it. Thank you, Fox, is what Dirty Dick says. So they're all trying to act like, you know, that this is a Republican issue and that the Republicans are hiding it now and that Trump is hiding it now. No, you guys hid it. You guys hid it for 4 years. It was not a big deal to any Democrat. I press you to find me any Democrat that said that this is a big deal and we need to get these files before 2 weeks ago. None. Now, this is a congressman from Tennessee, Burchett, and he is one of 10 Republicans, and there's a group of Democrats as well. They're trying to get this bill passed in the House of Representatives that would force the Trump administration to release everything unredacted. It's never going to happen. But he's on with Jake Tapper right after Jake Tapper does the interview with Amy Klobuchar. I want you to listen to what he says here.
Senator Klobuchar, as she likes to say, as a former prosecutor, you know, where the heck was she the last 4 years? Dick Durbin, and you're correct, he did effectively try to and did block my Senator Blackburn from getting those files released. And it's clear what the Democrats are up to. They're tanking. The country knows it. Their biggest candidate in the whole country, Jake, is a guy, people in New York, a guy people are accusing of a communist. And what's he say? Oh, hey, I'm not a communist. I'm a socialist. As if that's a selling point. That's what the Democrat Party has fallen into. Where the heck have they been the last 4 years? I'm ticked off at everybody. Look, this thing should have been handled. Now we're at the point they're going to start dumping files. And my biggest fear in this, Jake, you got 1,000 children that were abused by this dirtbag who's burning in hell right now, and he should be. And yet the American public's all pointing the finger, trying to play politics with this thing, and it's not accurate. I applaud the president for wanting to release those files. I think it's a good start. I think I think they keep saying he talked about it repeatedly, and that's just not accurate. He was asked 2 different times during the campaign about it, and he said, sure, we're going to release them.
Actually, he said in one of those times that I don't know about the Epstein files because there's a lot of stuff in there and innocent people that could be implicated that just rode on the plane or whatever. So where have they been for the last 4 years? Where were they during the Biden administration is what he says. And it's a fair question. It's what Jake Tapper asked Klobuchar. It's what Joe Scarborough asked Jamie Raskins. Where were you guys for 4 years? If it's so important to you now, why didn't you guys do anything, lift a finger to release this stuff under the Biden administration? Because they couldn't. They knew they couldn't. They understand what's going on. State secrets privilege. They know what's going on. They know what's going on. Remember Sam Harris, Democrat, Sam Harris, intellectual, that he was on the podcast, the Trigonometry podcast, and he says this about Hunter Biden's laptop.
I mean, Hunter Biden, at that point, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in his basement. I would not have cared.
Hunter Biden could have had literally, Hunter Biden could have had the corpses of dead children. This is the way they felt about Hunter Biden's laptop. This is the way they felt about Podesta's email. They didn't care about any of that stuff. It's all about politics for them. It's all about politics for them. Literally could have had the corpses of dead children in his basement. Now, Representative Anna Luna has come out that a whistleblower from the FBI tells her that most of this compromise, most of this information that people want, this compromising material that people want to be released and exposed, she says it's been destroyed. And a whistleblower from the FBI says that this stuff has already been destroyed. And I believe it's been destroyed as well, that you're never going to see this stuff. But take a listen to what she says.
Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna claims that the Biden FBI destroyed key files that were related to Jeffrey Epstein. And she joins us tonight to talk more about that. Good to have you on. Tell us what you know here.
Well, look, I've been looking, and I will say that, before Congress decided to try to virtue signal on this effort, I believe, to undermine President Trump, I was looking into this. And what I can tell you is back in February, there was a whistleblower who came forward actually very publicly stating that they had knowledge that the FBI was the FBI under the former deputy director was engaging in destruction of evidence. And I can tell you that I followed up on that. And this individual also had stated that it was publicly known at the FBI at that time that this was politically motivated. So I think when we're talking about not just the Jeffrey Epstein evidence, but also to anything related to, again, we just found out with a bombshell thing with Tulsi Gabbard that the Obama administration really laid the foundation and groundwork for Russia collusion. And then we see what happened.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. So she's talking about Obamagate. We're going to get into Obamagate and these revelations from Tulsi Gabbard in the next podcast. But she says that a whistleblower says that the FBI under Director Wray, in this cover up under Joe Biden, they destroyed most of this stuff that people want, most of this compromise, and most of the files that incriminate people were destroyed under the Biden administration. That's the same thing this former CIA director said on the Jesse Waters show a couple of weeks ago, and this went viral, of a former CIA director saying this stuff was probably destroyed. And I believe this stuff was destroyed in the cover-up under the Biden administration.
I'm not blaming the FBI director, Kash Patel, or the deputy director, Dan Bongino. I think that layer beneath them, that's part of what we like to call the deep state, has taken this bull by the horns, and they've probably destroyed information. Look at what the CIA did in 1975 after Congress ordered that it release all of its files related to an operation called MK Ultra. The director of the CIA went back to headquarters and ordered everything to be destroyed. And in the end, only about 20% of the documents survived.
So listen to what he's saying. He's saying that I believe that most of this stuff was destroyed under the Biden administration. The videos, the compromising material in the files, all this stuff was destroyed is what he says. And he says that just like they did in 1975 with the MK Ultra materials after Congress demanded that the CIA give up all their files on MK Ultra. Who was the director of Central Intelligence when this took place in 1975? Who was the director of Central Intelligence? Well, he became president of the United States later. It was George H.W. Bush who's director of Central Intelligence in 1975. He doesn't become, isn't confirmed as the director of Central Intelligence until January in 76, but he's appointed as the director of Central Intelligence and becomes the acting director of Central Intelligence in 1975 during the Halloween massacre. What's the Halloween massacre is about? So this is when Richard Nixon resigns and Gerald Ford, who sat on the Warren Commission. Gerald Ford sat on the Warren Commission. You know who else sat on the Warren Commission? Allen Dulles sat on the Warren Commission. Allen Dulles, who Kennedy fired after the Bay of Pigs incident, who was the director of Central Intelligence, who set up the Bay of Pigs incident. Kennedy fires him, famously said, I want to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter them into the wind, fires Allen Dulles. Allen Dulles sits on the Warren Commission. Gerald Ford sits on the Warren Commission, the commission to investigate what happened in the Kennedy assassination. How does Allen Dulles get on the Warren Commission? Gerald Ford, after sitting on the Warren Commission, becomes, after Spiro Agnew resigns, they force Richard Nixon to take Gerald Ford as his vice president. And then when Richard Nixon resigns, Gerald Ford becomes president of the United States. And then he starts firing people. The main person that he fires is William Colby. Fire William Colby and replaces William Colby with George W. Bush. Now, why did they want to fire William Colby so bad? Because the church committee is the committee investigating the intelligence community and all the stuff that they were doing in the 60s, all the covert stuff that they were doing. And it was in this church committee that Congress, they forced the CIA to give up all these files on MK Ultra. A church committee. It says the most shocking revelations of the committee include Operation MK Ultra, which the former CIA agent was just talking about, which involved drugging and torturing unwilling U.S. citizens as part of human experiments and mind control. COINTELPRO. The family jewels. William Colby ends up giving the family jewels to Congress, which lays out all of the secret activities that the CIA was doing. The family jewels are a set of reports detailing illegal and inappropriate, otherwise sensitive activities and conducted by the Central Intelligence from 1959 to 1973. William Colby, who was fired during the Halloween massacre and replaced with George H.W. Bush, William Colby, the CIA director who received the reports, dubbed them the skeletons in the CIA closet. So William Colby was forthcoming with Congress. Congress was demanding this stuff. William Colby was giving it up. So the first thing that Gerald Ford does when he comes in, who sat on the Warren Commission, he replaces William Colby and fires all these people during the Halloween massacre, replaces them with George W. Bush. George W. Bush starts destroying all this stuff. So it's the same cabal, people. It's the same people. And George Bush, this is him standing in front of Daley Plaza on the day that John Kennedy was assassinated. He says he didn't know where he was. Well, we know where you were. You were there in Dallas, standing in front of the book depository. You were running the whole thing. He was part of the CIA before he becomes CIA director. They were running it all. This is the last clip I'm going to play. This is Congressman Burchard and from Tennessee. Just played the clip of him with Jake Tapper. He was also on This Week with Martha. I want you to listen to what he says here.
You think unsealing the grand jury records is enough for you now?
I think it's a start. I don't think we're ever going to get to the bottom of anything, all of it, ma'am. I mean, look at the Kennedy assassination. Do you actually believe Lee Harvey Oswald shot President
ridiculous
Kennedy from the front and the back, and this magic bullet appears an hour later on a hospital gurney and in an emergency room? This town doesn't give up its secrets very easy, and I'd warn people too. Now we're getting a hold of this stuff. What happened the last 4 years under the Biden administration?
Yeah. So this is what he says. He says, do you believe John F. Kennedy was really assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald and shot from the front and the back, and then this magic bullet appears when John Kennedy's body is there in the hospital, this magic bullet just appears on his gurney in pristine shape, just like the passport on 9/11. They find the passport. You believe this stuff? What's wrong with you people? It's a cover-up. It's secrecy. Very powerful people. Anyway, we're going to get into Obamagate, back into Obamagate, and what's going on with that in the next podcast. Hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you on Friday.